to a new episode of the QCast. I'm John, joined again by my good pal Eddie. How you doing, buddy?
Doing great, John. 59.
Yeah. What's that?
59.
59. Yes. Episode 59. And we've got something else to celebrate today also, which is we passed 20,000 subscribers on the Johnkew channel.
You know, I was just putzing around on YouTube the other day, and I noticed that you've got, I think, 2.7 million views.
Oh, really?
On the channel.
I haven't even looked.
That's crazy.
That is kind of crazy when you think about it. Most of those come from my mom.
So, can't be, because my mom is both of those.
Right. So thank you to all the viewers and all the support. I mean, I'm consistently just so surprised with how much support we have on our podcast and on the channel in general. People are, very forgiving that I stumble over my words and stumble over my feet on the court. But,
this show is very lightly edited, very lightly.
Right.
So I think a few mistakes here and there are quite all right.
No, good times. I'm so happy to be doing what I'm doing. We were hitting today, Eddie, and I was like, it doesn't get any better than this. This is a job requirement. We get to hit new paddles in a beautiful sunlit Colorado.
And we hit some good ones today.
We
that
did.
Always makes it even better.
Yeah, so we do have a good show. So we're not going to do any deep dive today. We're going to talk mostly about paddles we've been hitting and some latest news, because it's been a while since you and I have been across from each other in the studio, a couple of weeks now. I've been doing a lot of travel. You did a little travel this week.
Some travel as well. Headed out to Happy Valley, PA for my son's MBA graduation from Penn State. So finally booting him out of the nest for good.
Empty nesters. Congrats
So
to him. He's got a degree in what?
Business. Master's degree.
Okay.
Yeah, MBA.
MBA. Fantastic. Already got a job, I hear.
Yeah, he lined up something pretty quickly, actually, faster than some of his peers. So
That's awesome.
I'm really thrilled for him. He's worked hard.
That's really great.
And where have you been on your travels?
Yes. Well, let's jump into that. So let's get latest news. So I went to, let's back up 2 weeks, Eddie. Let's go back to the U.S. Open. So I got a chance to travel out there. I just went for 2 days midweek. I think it was Wednesday and Thursday. And I got to see the first match that ALW and Andre Agassi played together on center court. And that was fun. And that was my first experience at the U.S. Open, so it was pretty special. Now, just a great culture there, big party atmosphere. The center court, to walk out of the center court, you have to come through the big tent with all of the business owners. You got paddle companies and gear companies and all this. And it's just like all of these side courts where all the pros and amateurs are playing, side by side. Yeah, very festive atmosphere. Really, really well run too. I got lucky to get on center court. There's it's a lottery system, and there's months wait to get into that center court. So, thank you to the good people at U.S. Open for finding a way to get me in there.
So I did not watch the matches, but I heard the first one was a win for ALW and Agassi against a couple of teenagers.
Yeah.
Probably combined age less than Andre.
There was 13 and 16, I think, were their respective ages. And so young kids. They didn't look that young when I was out there. And one of them, the guy, he's actually the partner of BK Pickleball. I met him at the JOOLA event in Las Vegas. He's a pro, I think he was like a 5.9 or something, or upper fives. But anyway, that's his partner. I was walking after the match. I watched the Andre Agassi and ALW match. Walking back, and I was like, BK, what's going on? And he turned around, and he had, I forget the gentleman's name who was playing. And I was like, you guys together? He's like, yeah, we got to play next. So that was cool. That small world. But he played great. And they took him to 3, and it was very close. And obviously they're targeting Andre. And there's a little bit of confusion, I feel like, between Andre and ALW. A lot of people have talked about this, about who should take left. A lot of people said that Annalee should have been left the whole time. But she also
That's what I would have guessed.
Yeah. She also plays right incredibly. She likes to poach and lurk with that 2E backhand on the right. So anyway, they went out, I think, in the quarterfinals?
What did you see in Andre's game that is noteworthy?
Yeah. Well, I mean, first of all, the guy, the guy's an elite athlete and has all this tennis background. And when he hits the paddle, with the ball with the paddle, it's just a true hit every time. I've never seen him or heard him hit off center. And it's like so consistent. You know, he doesn't have a soft game yet. I mean, he's better than mine, but he doesn't have a soft game compared to pros yet. But his drives from the baseline and, you know, counters and that sort of thing when he gets his hands on it are elite. And he gives anybody problems with that, you know. I saw it playing side by side with him in Las Vegas, you know, against Braden and Isaac. And, you know, they were having a hard time handling his 2E drives. And
does he go? Does he prefer his backhand?
Yeah, which is another reason for him to be on the right? Yeah, keep him on the right.
Interesting.
So. Anyway, yeah,
so ball striking
crazy. Is elite. Yeah, but he's relatively new to pickleball, and he's got work to do on the soft game and decision making. What was kind of crazy is I noticed that both of them were nervous walking out on court. And I'd never seen that from either. You know, I used to watch Andre when I was in high school playing all the majors in tennis, and I've never seen Anna Lee nervous either. But both of them walked on court, and I could tell. They were like, "Oh man, this is going to be tough."
How did you pick that up? Just body language, or
body language, and Anna Lee was kind of fidgeting, and and they were kind of chatting, but you could tell they're clearly kind of nervous.
Well, they're both in the presence of some greatness, right?
Yeah,
so maybe that's part of it.
I like it. But that was really cool. I had a great time. And I went there also for a Holbrook event where they brought in some of us paddle reviewers to show us the new Arma series, which we hit today. So we'll talk about that. So I'll reserve, what my impressions were on the court that day and what they told us about the core technology and everything else until we get to the Paddles of the Week section. Anything else with the U.S. Open noteworthy?
You didn't play?
No, I didn't play. But Chris and Isaac did. I stayed with Chris and Isaac in their Airbnb. And, good times all around. Cool area, too. I had not been to that area of Florida, Naples area. Anyway, so last week we went to the Selkirk event in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. And I posted the interview with the Barnes brothers last week. So if you want to know more about, kind of my trip, there's a lot in there in that interview. That's actually one of my favorite interviews I've done. It's not doing very well views-wise on YouTube, but I think there's so much in there, and they opened up about so much that is not known about Selkirk. But I'll wrap back around to that interview in a second. But overall, I think they duly impressed all of us reviewers. I think we all kind of went in there thinking, Selkirk hasn't released a relevant paddle in quite some time, and they still do great sales, and they're still a major contender, one of the biggest paddle companies out there. But, they seem to have been falling behind, and they were losing all their pros and all of this. So we went in there maybe with lower expectations, but we're all under NDAs. We can't talk about the new paddles we had, but I will say that they are very impressive and didn't feel like a traditional Selkirk paddle. That's all I can say. I can't talk about any of the construction of them. But the facilities were really, really impressive. And what I kind of suspect is maybe it wasn't intentional that the pros left, but they certainly leveraged the money they're saving for the pro salaries and putting that into all of this high-tech equipment for R&D. And one of their facilities, they have more lab equipment than either one of the agencies. So Pick a Pro Labs and USAP at Element Space and Defense.
For testing purposes, not just for research and development purposes.
All the things. So testing with the PB core cannon, their PB core cannon is the same piston cannon made by, I always want to say ADV, but that's the bag. It's the same company that makes the ones for Element Space and Defense and Pickle Pro Labs. And they have the higher end version, which is the piston cannon that PPL uses. And they also have a secondary cannon that's used for only research and durability purposes, made by the same company, also a piston cannon. So they technically have two of these high-tech piston cannons. They have a CT scanner in the back, which USAP also has, but I don't think PPL has. And that's a 3D X-ray, basically. And they can, do a cross section of a paddle and see if it's core crushed or not. They've got it's like a 3D topographic machine that creates these histograms and renders the surface at exaggerated elevation between the peaks and valleys of the surface, and they can measure durability that way and look at like the new Infinigrit compared to raw carbon fiber, do durability testing, revisit the histograms. They've got one of these ball cages, Canon ball cages, where it reloads the balls, fires it at the paddle hundreds or thousands of times. They've got a ton of stuff. There's a ton of stuff. So very impressive there. And they've got a good series of engineers working with them. Was it Dana was their main engineer in the in-house. They're also working with Patrick Drain, the Washington State guy that was integral in the development of BB Core, and now that formula is being used for BB Core. He was the advisor of Curtis Cruz at PPL. Tight-knit group of very influential people involved in all of these. So, I think that alone is going to give them kind of an edge moving forward. Being able to, and also in that same factory, they're able to manufacture at scale Gen 1, their Gen 1 paddles. They also import a lot of thermoform paddles, Gen 2, from China, and they finish them there, add the Infinigrit, add the grips and that sort of thing, and the edge guards there. They've got a staff of 30 people in one building. They have 5 buildings spread across Coeur d'Alene. It's pretty impressive. Their distribution center was massive. I mean, we're talking like a 3-story tall building with no stories. It's just like stacks and stacks of paddles going up, 30 feet in the air and hundreds of feet wide. In that facility, they have thermoforming capabilities, not at scale, but they have, like an oven, and you can put in probably 30 molds for thermoforming. We actually did, I should have brought this down. We did like a Build-A-Bear thing at that facility where they brought us in and they gave us options for cores, for all foam cores. We had high density, low density. They gave us options for layups. So you had a layup from all fiberglass, you had unidirectional carbon fiber, you had a twill carbon fiber weave, and you could put as many of those you wanted on both sides of the paddle. And then they had us, all choose what core and layup we wanted. And then that day, they put it in the press, thermoformed it, brought it back to the other facility, and somebody put the edge guard on it, wrapped it, and gave it to us, and we played with them that night and kind of compared them.
That's so cool.
That was really cool.
So what was your construction?
My construction, good question, was I did the low density foam core, which is a little bit lighter, softer. And then for the layup, I did from top to bottom, it was unidirectional carbon fiber, twill carbon fiber weave in the middle, and then fiberglass on the bottom. So 3 on each side, right? So I wanted to feel what the twill weave in the center of the layup would feel like.
Not seen that before.
The top. Yeah, I don't think we've seen that. I think.
Will we see it based on your?
It played fine, but there was very little difference we could tell between our respective paddles.
Okay.
And I think it felt softer and springy, but I think a lot of that soft and springy came from the low density.
Were you limited to one
core.
type of core, or were you able to do multiple composite cores?
No, just one type. There are 2 choices for the core, and it was that expanded polypropylene foam.
Too fun.
Yeah, that was really cool. And we got to lay out on top of the layup. We got to put the peel ply on. You cut it out. It's like cloth, a literal like white cloth. You cut it out roughly in the shape and drape it over, and they glue it all together and secure it all together in the thermoforming oven. So that was cool. And
did everybody get the same shape?
Yeah, I think we all had the same shape. We also did a molded paddle. It was basically like the Lux, right? And similar to the video you and I saw at Babolat of their factory in China, it's very labor intensive. So they brought in like one of us to do the patches here and there, and another person to do more carbon fiber patches, and it just reiterated like we knew a very labor intensive process.
A lot of stickers.
A lot of stickers here and there, yeah. So
Too fun. Sorry I missed it.
Yeah, very cool. People were asking about Jetty.
Well, they've probably got a lock on the Coeur d'Alene labor market because that's a small town.
It's a small town. We got beautiful weather while we were there too. It was like high in the 70s and sunny, bluebird skies, cool at night. Really gorgeous area.
Yeah,
I'd
mountains
never
and
visited.
lake. It's really lovely.
Oh, you've been to Coeur d'Alene?
Long time ago.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, we stayed right on the lake. Just a pretty visit. But yeah, I mean, to wrap it all up, just in terms of the Selkirk visit, I think we're going to see big things from them next year. They've invested so much into R&D. They have everything they need at their facility. They can literally manufacture a paddle, even a thermoform paddle, as a test, a prototype, in one day, like they did our Build-A-Bear paddles. Bring it over from that facility to the other facility, PB core test it. Do the PB core test with a solid ball, 60 miles an hour inbound, get the USAP PB core score, switch over to the Vulcan ball with holes, shoot it at 50 miles an hour.
Amazing.
Get the PEF from PPL. Do some durability testing with the secondary cannon or some research purposes. Take it to the cage, shoot it at 100 miles an hour 1,000 times. Look at the grid on the texture and the CT scanner and the topographic imagery, and then all these things they can do in real time, basically within hours, days, right? Versus other companies that are forced to come up with a prototype, hope that it passes PB core, send it in, wait weeks, potentially months, depending on if they want to pay the expedited fee, and it comes back. If it fails, they have to start over again, right? That sets them back months, literally months. Whereas Selkirk's able to now they're able to adjust on the fly.
So before we leave Selkirk, what was your feeling as to their perception of themselves at this point in time?
Yeah.
Do they feel like they are the market leader in innovation and technology in pickleball paddles, or do they feel like they're not there yet and they've got some work to do?
That's an excellent question. I think there's both confidence that they know they've made many right decisions over the past year, and they know they're in a strong position to succeed next year. And self-awareness that they know they haven't been the leader in performance paddles. Partly by design. One of the things, if you go back to the interview I did with the Barnes brothers, and I do think this there's not smoke and mirrors. They're not trying to reconstruct the past. But they said that, there was the arms race in 2024 still going on, and they could have produced these Gen 3 paddles or even the Gen 2 paddles that eventually broke. But they weren't interested in getting into releasing paddles that are designed to break. Part of the perk of the paddle was that it's partially broken down when you get it in terms of core crushing, and they knew that those would break. So there might be a little bit of hindsight's 2020 there, but I think they were cautious to get into that because of the durability suspicions, and I think that was a smart choice. Ultimately, it will be a smart choice because even though their reputation is damaged right now, like most paddle enthusiasts don't think much of Selkirk these days, and I was probably in the same boat. Just before I went to visit them, I knew they were on the right track and talking to them, but I didn't realize the scale of how much they were on the right track until actually being brought to their factories and seeing it. So yeah, I think there's both self-awareness that we're kind of in this spot. We're not known as a performance paddle company right now, but we will be, and we're going to be stronger next year.
Do they like the 007?
I think they do. I asked them what their favorite paddles were, and I think it was either Mike or Rob was like, whatever the latest paddle was, and I think 007 was on that list. So, yeah.
Just giving you hard times. Okay.
So, yeah, I had a good time. It was illuminating, and yeah, thanks to Selkirk for inviting us. I think it was smart on their part, obviously. It's a risk, you invite paddle reviewers, and you might end up with an Adidas situation, or you might end up with, with Selkirk, or even JOOLA benefited, I think, from bringing us out there.
Well, it's just so easy for anyone to act as though they know something without actually knowing anything, and it's good to get the background on why things are the way they are.
That is true. That's true, Eddie. All right, let's move on to a couple of other little newsworthy items. Quong Duong signed with a new Vietnamese company. They're not new, but new for most people.
I've not heard of it. I saw your show notes here. I'm like,
Yeah.
what is that?
Right, Sypik. And if you go watch the last interview that the Dink did with him, Zane Navratil interviewed Quong and Duke, his dad. And so it's good. It's a big contract. Zane suspected $500,000 just for the paddle deal. And Duke was like, honestly, that's too little for Quong. He deserves more than that. So maybe even more than that, but we don't know. But judging from what Quong and Duke were saying about the paddle, it sounds like it's going to be very similar to the JOOLA 4s. So it sounds like a Gen 3 paddle, probably floating core or partially floating. And they said it's clearly a power paddle. Duke mentioned that it has more penetration into the core. It plays a little bit differently than the Perseus 4. I imagine it's elongated shape, which Quong likes. But yeah, I just found it interesting. And I went back, I was like, Sypik. I mean, I feel like I've heard them before. So I searched my inbox, and they had sent me an email last year like, hey, do you want to review our paddles? And I, kind of, at that time, I always look on their webpage, and sometimes I reply, sometimes I don't. So I just sent him a reply like, hey, congrats on QD. I'd be happy to take a look at his paddle. So maybe we'll get a sneak peek at the paddle before it comes out.
But it's not for sale yet. Nothing's for sale yet. Okay.
Yeah. And we're
just look forward to that.
Yeah. We're just speculating on what it is. Last bit of news, Jay Devilliers playing with the JOOLA instead of his Vulcan, which I've only ever seen Devilliers with Vulcans.
Oh my gosh, he's been with them for probably 5 years now.
Yeah, at least, which is an eternity in pickleball. But yeah, at MLP Columbus, he was playing with the JOOLA. I can't recall which one. Perseus 4 maybe is what I suspect. But it'll be interesting to see. If he continues to play with the JOOLA, are his results going to look different than playing with the Vulcan? I never hit with his Vulcans. I'm sure they were okay paddles, but probably nothing in terms of firepower like the new 4s.
Will he get a signature paddle? I guess that's the question.
Is there enough space on the paddle to write his name? A lot of letters in that one.
That's a good point. In English and French.
Right. So that's it for news.
All right.
Let's jump into paddles.
Busy couple of weeks there, John.
Yes, indeed.
Are you home for a while?
Just a couple of weeks. The next is the bread and butter nerdy
in
tourney.
Florida, right?
Yeah, heading to Florida weekend after next. And then China after that for the 6-0 factory tour.
Okay.
Yeah. And then I'll be at San Clemente. Michelle and I are heading back there. We love that place.
Your frequent flyer miles are adding up, my friend.
Yeah, for sure.
Let's talk paddles.
Let's talk paddles. So let's jump into the Volair paddles first. So Volair sent out some new paddles. Another bit of newsworthy stuff. I was going to mention it last week, but I forgot. So Dylan Frazier was signed with Volair, which was a big surprise. We saw him playing with the JOOLA paddles. So Volair must have offered him something he couldn't pass up, right? They also mentioned in the email associated with the paddles that Dylan was involved with the R&D, so the development and testing of their V.1F paddle series, so this new paddle series we have. So the goal of these is more power-centric paddles. They wanted something with more pop, high spin, and but still maintaining control. So they did specify. It wasn't like maximum power and maximum control. It was like maximum pop is what they wanted, specifically pop. Not so much power as well as control and spin, which go side by side. So, so we got to hit with these. There are, they've already been released. They were released on May 9th. The cost for these is $180 for the V.1F and $200 for the wide body and the hybrid shape. So we'll get to the shapes in a second. But the key features, there's a blended surface, this hybrid weave of PET or titanium threads together with carbon fiber. The layup is from top to bottom, fiberglass, carbon fiber on the bottom. So 2 layers of fiberglass on the top, carbon fiber on the bottom, which explains, why they wanted to go for more pop, right? So totally different layup than their previous paddles. Construction, thermoformed with edge foam. Standard size polypropylene cells. Okay, so let's jump in.
Gen 2.
Gen 2, yep.
Some of these shapes are outrageous.
Wild. Let's get the basic shape. So this is the wide body shapes. This is the same as the Mach 2 Forza, which we all know and love. Most of us do. But you can see is that a bluish tint?
Yeah,
Eddie?
it is.
Okay, yeah, so I see that. But I also see the shiny PET threads.
Yeah, it's kind of a purplish.
Yeah, so V.1F wide body. This is $200 for this one.
So that's kind of their classic Mach 2 Forza shape.
Yeah. Yeah, so a little bit shorter than 16, a little bit wider than 8, and 5.5-inch handle. And we've got this guy looking good. Looking good.
And then
what happened?
No.
Hello.
It's the lollipop again.
That's a pizza peel if I've ever seen one. I mean, frankly, it looks ridiculous. Let's be honest here.
What is that, a 10-inch handle, John, on that?
Something like that. I can fit 2 hands on here comfortably. It actually, and I'm not saying that all paddles should have shorter handles, and this is my preference, but with my 2, I put a finger on the back, and that gives me more stability, and also it allows me to come around the ball a little more. I don't like holding the paddle like this, like I used to with my tennis racket anymore. It throws me off.
Yeah, I'd need some more time with the full 10-finger two-handy.
For sure.
Yeah,
for sure. But I mean, the face is so compressed. I hit with it. It hits a little better than what I suspected by looking at it. But it's like the sweet spot shaped like a sandwich. It's like wide.
It doesn't hit badly
super
though.
Short. I didn't have a good time with it. I definitely felt how short the sweet spot was.
Yeah.
If I hit outside of that 3-inch band, top or bottom, it kind of died on me.
It is 8 inches wide?
I think it's like 8.2, 8.1.
Okay.
Yeah. It's the same width as the wide body, and same length. Just look how much of and you're losing twist weight and stability with that.
You're really not gaining anything. I guess if you're the type who does like just a full baseball bat grip.
Yeah. I noticed you get some whip with this.
A little bit.
You can really kind of drive them home if you find
I had some nice
spot.
drives with that paddle.
Yeah, you did. I did notice. But I guess we can talk about this. I mean, this did hit well. It's heavier, has a higher swing weight, definitely poppier. I don't like the feel of 2 layers of fiberglass on the surface in the same way I didn't like the feel of the Chorus Fires. They're just really stiff.
I was just going to bring that up as a point of comparison.
Yeah.
For feel.
The feel of that, you definitely feel the pop. So if you love the Mach 2 Forza, but it was just too soft and plush and too control-oriented for you, you still love the shape though, but you want more firepower in the form of pop, this is a good option. I think they also juiced up the grit on this sucker. The spin on these is crazy.
That's true.
Yeah.
I wouldn't put this as an evolution of the Mach 2 Forza. It's not a control paddle with a little bit more power than was there before. For feel and for that power aspect, it's a totally different paddle. If you like the shape, I would say go for it.
Yeah. I can agree with you on that. It's not so much in the same family as the Mach 2 Forza.
Yeah. It's very tingy and plasticky feeling on ball strikes.
Yeah.
And that's the fiberglass.
The fiberglass, yeah. Anytime it's close to the top, unless it's sandwiched in between carbon fiber, it throws me off. I don't like the ball response. I don't care for the vibrations coming into sound. Yeah, I think you're right. It has a plasticky feel when it's mostly fiberglass that you're hitting. Mm-hmm. But, I could see the appeal for it for people that love a really poppy paddle and tingy paddle.
4 shapes, you said, right?
More shapes. This is the one that Dylan's playing with, so they have a hybrid shape. So the V.1F, similar to their
hybrid
1 Forza. Yeah. I feel like this shape's a little outdated now. It's the same kind of arrow curve shape that came out early in 2014 with 2024. I'm a decade behind, Eddie. What decade are we in? It's the same hybrid shape that came out in 2024, where it's kind of ultra-rounded top, 16.5 inches long, but it's a little bit narrower than is allowed, right? They're down at like, 7.3 or 7.4 inches instead of bringing it out to 7.5.
Yeah, the parallel sides and the pretty highly radius top, it's starting to feel a bit dated, as you said.
It is. But Dylan clearly likes it. There's still a place for it.
There's not a place for this.
This curiosity, like the blade shape, right? So 17 inches long, 7 inches wide.
That's a good way to, the blade.
Yeah.
Is that what they're calling it?
Yeah, I think that's kind of a thing, right? It's been a thing for a long time, and I hardly ever see these shapes in the wild. Selkirk had one, right? The blade-shaped one. Extra elongated handle, another 7-inch handle. But, I mean, hitting with it today, not quite as similar to the pizza peel, not quite as bad as I thought, but man, you really feel the lack of width on this. If you hit it slightly off center,
my guess is the twist weight's not very high on that.
I should have measured. They've got averages, so which are XLL, so the average twist weight is 5.58.
That's not as low as I was thinking it would be.
Yeah. A handle length is 6.5 inches on these. It feels like a 7-inch handle, honestly. Like you take this rubber band off and it's just handle all the way up with 2 hands on it.
If I'm going to have a handle that long, I'd actually probably go for the other one.
Which one? Oh, yeah.
The pizza spatula.
Any other thoughts on these, Eddie?
No, it's a nice offering from Volair that just puts them into a space where they haven't been. So it'll be curious to see how many people pick these up for the power. Well, the pop aspect. You're right. They're not really power paddles.
Yeah, there's not much court penetration with these in terms of full swings from the baseline more power than their previous paddles for sure, but not as much power as, other popular power paddles, but definitely poppier.
We saw Bread and Butter with that first titanium paddle. Mm-hmm. And a whole bunch of other manufacturers got on the bandwagon very quickly. Yeah. And now we don't seem to be seeing quite as many. Do you think that is going to stick around, or have we seen the dwindling already of the PET? So
I've already thrown out my hot take last year in our predictions podcast that PET/titanium was a fad that would die out in 2025. Yeah. So I'm still kind of sticking to that. I think we're seeing a decline in it. Clearly, there's some perks to it. It softens up the face a bit, makes it feel a little plusher. But there's a trade-off. It's not as poppy or powerful, So if you like a more control-oriented paddle, I also feel like the grit doesn't last as long on the PET surfaces or any kind of woven surfaces rather than the unidirectional. I feel like the peel ply just does a better job at adhering and curing to unidirectional fibers than it does a woven cloth. I think we see that in the Kevlar paddles. They seem to wear down quicker in terms of grit than do the unis and the PET titanium stuff too.
Great observation.
What about you, Eddie? What do you think? What's your prediction?
I don't think we'll be seeing too many more in about 6 months.
Yeah. It's had a good run, but I don't think it's going to be like nothing close to like unidirectional carbon fiber, or I don't think it has the staying power of even Kevlar. I think Kevlar stuck around for a good while. I think we even see pros playing with Kevlar too. I saw, Jaume is playing with the Ruby these days.
And we'll talk more about those differences in the next lineup of paddles.
Are any pros playing with titanium PET?
I can't think of one.
No. You think their peers would make fun of them? They brought a sparkly paddle on the court. To their credit, these are pretty tastily done for Volair. They're not gonna blind you with sparkles. They're they look good.
Moving on.
Good, sir. Yes. Well, look real quick. There's a X-ray. I don't know if you got the latest iteration of the notes, but the X-ray of the hybrid shape, and it's just showing a classic thermoformed Gen 2 paddle with standard polypropylene cells and edge foam.
That edge foam is hard to pick up.
It is, yeah. It's a very thin edge foam. Almost looks like a Gen 1 paddle. Moving on, Eddie. Let's move on to the Holbrook Arma.
Yeah, well, what does Arma mean?
I think they told us at the event in Naples, but I don't recall. It wasn't anything special. I think it was just like, this sounds cool, so we're going to call it that.
Like an armament.
Maybe, yeah.
Okay.
It is a cool kind of name. Like, it's kind of memorable, you know. And
I got to hand it to Holbrook. A year ago, maybe a little bit more than a year ago, I didn't really see them as a legitimate pickleball paddle company. Kind of goofy, a little bit lower quality, and every iteration has gotten better and better. The last series, the Era, the edgeless paddles, really good offering, probably their best yet. And this Arma series just keeps on keeping on.
Keeps on keeping on. I think these are going to be very popular paddles. They play very well. But before we get into playability and what we felt on the court with them, so they're not released yet. They're coming out next month, June 10th. They'll be $260 for the carbon fiber and $280 for the PET metallic. Oh, let's look at the X-rays. So I got 2
They're
X-rays
nuts,
here.
man.
Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah. So the core construction is comprised of a hybrid of 2 different cell sizes for polypropylene. So on the bottom of the paddle, you have a very large cell. This looks like 11 or 12 millimeter diameter. We could get it off this X-ray. Bigger than most 10 mils that I've seen. And then standard cell, 8 millimeter, maybe narrow. So is it 6 millimeter? I'll verify that. Regardless, it's a smaller cell.
It looks to be about half of the larger cells.
Almost, yeah. Maybe it's a 6 mil, but it's a dual density polypropylene for the core. And what you see is, if you're listening, you're not watching on YouTube, and you don't see the X-ray, I'd say the bottom 3/4 of the core, down from the handle up to the 3/4 of the face, is this large cell polypropylene, and there's like an arc going up. If you're looking, at the paddle like you're holding it upright, kind of like a frowny face.
Kind of covers it like that.
Yeah, where there's the interface between the large cell and the small cell polypropylene, and the small cell comprises, the top third or so, but it does kind of taper down on the ends.
Those small cells go almost down to the lower corners of the paddle face.
Yeah, so there is kind of a taper cutting into the large cell, and then a whole boatload of foam surrounding the core, not entirely floated. You can see the polypropylene goes down into the handle, but man, starting at the neck and a good. So we're looking at the wide body right now, the wide body X-ray.
Yeah.
A good inch, I'd say, on each side and at the top of foam. But scroll down to the elongated, the T-shape. Holy cow, that is a lot of foam.
That's more foam than I've ever seen on a paddle.
A good 1.5 inches at the top. And this is definitely my favorite of the shapes.
Which one?
The elongated, the T. I think it just plays fantastic. For various reasons we'll get into in a minute. But you can also see, both of these also have internal perimeter weighting at 4 and 8 o'clock.
Yep.
So smart for Holbrook to stick some lead in there internally to raise the twist weight, give it a wider sweet spot and more forgiveness.
So is there a different type of phone at the edge, right at the edge guard, like a 1/4 inch, or is that the edge guard itself?
That is a good question. I think it is the edge guard itself. I don't think you have traditional edge foam outside of this big, thick EVA band.
Okay.
Could be wrong. I'll verify that with Holbrook and with the dissection. But I do know also that they wrap the edge foam, all the foam around the edge, in unidirectional carbon fiber. So it's not just stuck around the polypropylene and then laid up with the surface layers. It's like encased in a wrap, like a burrito wrap of unidirectional carbon fiber to give it more.
Like the Pickleball apes?
No, so it's not several tubes of it. It's just one big burrito.
Okay.
A big foam burrito in there.
John, what are you thinking about right now?
I'm a little bit hungry. so yeah, it gives it a little bit more structural integrity. Let's get into how these paddles played, Eddie. What are your thoughts on them?
That elongated paddle, John, was amazing. For an elongated, I felt no degradation in sweet spot. It felt just very solid. Very clean ball strikes with that paddle. I can't really fault it.
Yeah.
I didn't notice any spin characteristics, good or bad, but everything else was spot on.
So we're talking about this guy right now. And kudos to Holbrook. I like their design. I'd love to see a white edge guard and white grip on this too.
White?
Yeah.
Okay.
As just a black and white theme. I think it looks sharp. But I love
Agree with that.
I love their graphics. I think they do a really good job with it's kind of a simple logo and just kind of tasteful placement of other elements here.
I thought this paddle hit very hard. I like the longer handle of this particular model.
Yeah.
I mean, what can I say? Really nice offering.
Yeah, it's almost hard for me to put into words how these play. It just hits nice. You know, it feels great when you hit it. Good sweet spot. Definitely at the top of the power spectrum. You know, comparable to JOOLA Gen 4. The closest paddle I compare this to, it is a 14 millimeter. All these are, is the JOOLA Perseus 4 14 millimeter. It's very similar to that. And these elongated ones. And there's the PET offering. So this is the more expensive of the two. You and I were chatting today. Neither one of us like this as much as the unidirectional carbon fiber one.
A little too soft for my taste. Yeah, I mean, if I have to pick one, it's not going to be that one. It'll be this one all day.
There's still a very good amount of power with this, but it's just a little more subdued power. So maybe if you're feeling like this is too much, then you might go to this for a little more control, but still top of the legal power limit for the titanium. I also feel like, I don't know, the spin was good on both of these. Maybe I'm biased, but I think the unidirectional carbon fiber just overall gives better spin to me.
It may. Like I said, I didn't notice any outstanding properties for spin.
Yeah. But I think they did well. I think I don't know how much the dual density polypropylene has a role in the feel and performance of the paddle versus the massive amounts of EVA foam in the outside as well as the internal weighting. I think it's a smart design. I can't feel enough of the polypropylene to contribute the performance perks to the polypropylene. You know what I mean? Like, this is kind of a new thing. I don't know if it's actually doing anything.
Right.
I'm sure it's doing something, but it's hard to piece apart what it's actually doing when you're hitting with this because there's so much else going on in the paddle.
What do they say is the reason for the dual polyprop?
They mentioned bigger sweet spot, combination of power and control, kind of the usual suspects of why anybody doesn't get into a paddle, right? But they have their reasons for doing it. I think it's interesting and innovative. I just don't know what it's actually doing, but proof's in the pudding. The paddle plays great.
It does. I mean, that foam has got to come out to all the way at the bottom of these letters, right? And then probably up into here.
Yeah.
That's a lot of foam.
A lot of foam, which lends itself, segues into the next topic is I'm not confident that these aren't won't break in and eventually become rocket launchers. There's a lot going on and kind of the state of these looking at the x-rays, the cells don't look too bad in this. They sent us an x-ray that they had done from, I think it was from USAP, and the cells looked a little more deformed. These are still maintaining somewhat of an octagonal shape, but man, those large cells are so large that they just seem smashed. You know what I mean? Here and there. So.
And the small ones, as you get down to the lower portions of the paddle, there's so many just incomplete cells.
Yeah, I mean, you can see they just cut out what you have to, right? And the cells don't line up with each other, obviously, because they're small cells versus large cells. But there's just so many moving parts, in this paddle that I feel like it's signs that it could break in very easily and become, and given that it's right at the top of the legal power limits, I could see that being an issue. So you can't say for sure. We'll find out.
We'll keep an eye on it.
Yeah, we'll find out. But these paddles, by the way, they don't play like 14 millimeter paddles. They feel much plusher. They just have a great feel. If you're a tennis player and you like the feel of a tennis racket, then this is one of the paddles out there that I think translates best for tennis players. Really good dwell, really good spin, good power. Just feels very rackety.
There's another shape that they're offering.
Oh, yes, sir.
Wide body shape.
So titanium and then the wide body. And this also comes in a titanium.
Your thoughts on the shape?
I feel like this shape is not my favorite. This one hit it particularly hard. This unit, now I played with the wide bodies in Florida and they didn't hit as hard as the elongated. This one I feel like has more pop and power than the elongateds. So it makes me suspect, something going on with this individual unit. Maybe a little bit of core crushing or something.
It could be. I felt like that one also had a smaller sweet spot than this elongated paddle. So
Which does make sense if you look at the foam from the X-rays. There's much less foam in the wide body.
Right.
Strangely, maybe it's to pass PB core. Maybe if they put that much foam in a wide body, it would just exceed PB core regulations. I don't know why, but I mean, I feel like the sweet spot's still good on this. But yeah,
for sure.
For an elongated paddle, it has a pretty big sweet spot, the T shape versus the S shape. I also feel like the shorter handle, it's like a 5.25 inch handle. It just doesn't feel good for 2Bs. I know that, like Jack Monroe, he puts 2 fingers on the back. You can do that, and some people like the ability to use shorter handles for various reasons. I think that's a minority of people. This paddle shape, first of all, I don't think it looks that great. It's kind of blockish, and it just feels kind of old style to me.
Mm-hmm. All right.
But if you're a wide body fan and you don't mind a shorter handle, then this might be the one for you out of these. So overall, good stuff from Holbrook.
Holbrook killing it.
So I'm excited to see where they're going with these and how their durability lasts. I did Q-Core these suckers. Let's look at those results. I only did the Arma T, so the elongated carbon fiber, not the metallic, and that came at 0.532. And if you remember from my Q-Core scores, it roughly translates if you drop a 0.1 from each one of my scores to get down to USAP. So my 0.532 would be roughly a 0.432 for USAP. Now they are passed. These did pass PB core testing, and I can't say for sure that mine is exactly, that translation is not exact by any means. But I can tell you kind of the lineup. So if we look where the Arma T lands with respect to other paddles, we've got the new Ronbus Ripples just below it. So the R1 and R4 shapes coming up. So the T is 0.532, the R1 is 0.527, the R4 is 0.520. Below them is the PaddleTech TKO CX 14.3, and then the Proton Flamingo. So that's clearly at kind of the top of the power level. Above it, we have the PaddleTech ALWC 12.7, just barely above it. We've got the Ronbus Ripple V2 R2 shape, just above that. Then the Chorus Fire HX, which, mine came in at 0.550. Those did fail PB core from USAP. So just to give you kind of a perspective, we might be in the illegal zone at this point. Diadem Hush above that. It's clearly illegal, above that. So top of the power groupings, right? So just to give you some perspective there. All right. Anything else you want to talk about for the Armas?
No, solid offering. I mean, if I had to pick up that versus some of those other power paddle offerings, it's a tough choice.
Yeah.
It's right up there.
Yeah.
And good for Holbrook because, again, a year and a half ago, they were not even on the radar.
Yeah, that's true. All right, moving on. Ripple, more ripples in the news.
Oh, my goodness. Finally.
Yeah. All right, so we weren't going to talk about these until they were absolutely 100% PB Core 0.43 approved and not in prototype form. And there was an official statement from USAP. So let's get to the statement first and kind of what's going on behind the scenes. So USAP released a statement last week saying, and I'll just read it. In late 2024, Ronbus submitted a beta version of the Ripple R1.14 for prototype testing. While this sample met initial tests, subsequent production samples did not pass PB Core testing for certification. Ronbus has worked closely with USA Pickleball to ensure that its Ripple V2 paddle, set to launch this month, met all requirements to be fully USAP and PB Core approved. USA Pickleball appreciates the collaboration with Ronbus as we are committed to working with all manufacturers to ensure fair and transparent testing. To prevent any confusion in the market, all previous Ripple versions will be voluntarily removed from USA Pickleball approved paddle database effective July 1st, 2025. The paddle database is going to be much thinner starting on July 1st. A lot of sunsetting going on that date. And Ronbus submitted, another statement. We'll kind of get into what they said with respect to the technology behind this. So Ronbus is doing a refresh program for all the Connect members that bought the beta ripples. So remember, there are several versions of the betas and it got confusing.
Yep.
Every one of those is going to be sunset. And they're offering a refresh program for that. Now, I just got details on this today, so this is kind of breaking news. So here are the kind of requirements to get this program, to be approved for this program. It has to be Connect members who purchased a new beta ripple, so the R1 or R2 shapes are the ones they had back then, between the dates of September 15th, 2024 and January 31st, 2025. So that's one part of the eligibility. Secondly, they must have current possession of the paddle and submit a claim form with a receipt of the paddle and a serial number. If you bought a ripple from an authorized distributor, contact the distributor before June 15th to enter the refresh program. I didn't realize that anybody was selling these over the counter. That's new to me. I thought it was only through Connect. So maybe, I don't know. After the claim is verified, the refresh program will result in a 50% discount for the new V2 models. The corresponding models, that's an important piece of this. If you bought the R1 shape, you can only use the refresh program to get 50% off of the R1 shape on the version 2. And same for the R2.
I don't love that.
Yeah, I'd kind of like to see them be able to try the R4, right? Because they already purchased. Anyway, that's one of the stipulations. The beta ripple does not need to be returned, so it's yours to keep. And it cannot be combined with any other discount code, so you can't use my code for additional 10% off. The refresh program starts on May 16th, so coming up soon, before the paddle is launched. The paddle's not going to be launched until May 30th, but you can get on the refresh program starting May 16th. Okay. A lot going on there, but basically you get 50% off if you can prove you bought one of you're the original purchaser and owner of one of the original shapes, beta versions of the ripple, and you have to trade it in for the same shape. And you can keep the
But
beta.
you get to keep it. That's pretty cool.
That's nice. All right, so Eddie, what's different about these? Let's jump straight into the x-rays, shall we? So looking at it, I didn't put the old x-rays in here, but I can describe to you and to people just listening who aren't viewing on YouTube. We're looking firstly at this is the R1 shape.
Yep.
Same foam core construction with the EVA foam channels separated by unidirectional carbon fiber stringers, kind of like these channels going up and down the paddle. But I can tell you, compared to the original beta versions, the channels have expanded north and south along the axis of the paddle to a much greater extent, so that there's far less EVA surrounding foam to serve as that.
So you're saying they've extended it this way?
Exactly.
Like almost to the edge guard?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it looks like maybe a half an inch of EVA
And that was not like that before?
compared to about an inch of the EVA foam before.
Gotcha.
Right. This is all EVA foam, but what I mean by EVA foam band surrounding it. So that trampoline, basically, the springs of the paddle have reduced in size, and the carbon fiber stringers have been elongated. You can also see more of the carbon fiber stringers at the very top and the bottom of the middle 3 channels of EVA foam. Those have been reinforced with more carbon fiber. So you see like stringers on the edges from the 3 channels on both edges are not connected at the top and bottom, versus the stringers in the middle 3 channels are all connected by...
So 3 here, connected at the top and the bottom.
Yep.
Like that, whereas these are more
open,
isolated.
Yeah, they're more open and just, looser on the edges. So purpose of that is to tighten things up a bit, get it within spec in terms of firepower. And Dong, I spoke with Dong about this yesterday, and he also wanted to use this reinforcement for durability of the paddle, so there's less break-in. That was one of his objectives and goals for this. One of the effective results of this reinforcement is adding weight right down the center of the paddle, and these are significantly higher twist weights than the original betas. So if we look at the the swing weight numbers, big differences. I got a lot of notes here. Okay. So the R1 for the version 2 is a swing weight of 125 stock.
Yeah.
That's pretty beefy. It feels about that tracks with how we felt on the court today. R2, so the wide body shape, 117. And the R4, 116. Interesting. The R4 is 1 point lighter. These are my results from my paddles. Okay, comparing R1 to R4.
Right.
Now, I did put weight on the R4, so that might be that's definitely adding some.
I would say with the weight, they feel pretty close.
Okay, yeah. Anyhow, so the original beta, there are a few versions of the betas, but the lightest weight of the betas, the R1 for comparison was 108 swing weight, mine, and the R2 is 103. So that's the difference between 14 and 17 swing weight points.
They feel completely different as far as swingability.
Yeah, for sure. Now, clearly, most people are weighting up the original beta versions, just maybe close to these, but stock, these are very much heavier paddles. Eddie, what are your impressions of the paddle?
Well, before we go into that, talk a little bit more about what these stringers are, because in the X-ray, you can't tell how deep they are. Are they pretty much just strings, or are they actual carbon fiber walls that go kind of face to face?
So here, let me go get a dissected paddle. That was the perfect time for show and tell. Okay. So here we have one of the original Ripple betas dissected. Try not to get carbon fiber splinters. They're really awful.
They're nasty.
Yeah, so I cut it down the middle like a sandwich, right? And if you open it up, you can kind of see what's going on here. So we've got the tan edge foam around the edges. Then we've got these foam channels. So this is the outermost band of foam, and then you can see these parallel channels of EVA foam. Now, I'll give this to you, Eddie. You can press in, you can feel these carbon fiber stringers, and they're basically unidirectional strips of carbon fiber aligned vertically within the core to give it structure, kind of like, 2x4s in your rafters,
Yeah.
So it can't compress.
They're not, they're in the foam, but it feels like they go all the way to the face.
They do. So it's face to face.
Okay.
It goes from surface layup to surface layup through the foam, right? And that's giving it.
So they're almost like carbon fiber walls.
Yeah.
Or tunnels, not so much strings.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, stringer. I think that's just, maybe it's the wrong term to use, but regardless, yeah. So they're providing that structure so that you feel the EVA foam is super soft.
Yeah.
And that's giving it the power. But to moderate that power, so it's not, like a racquetball racket, they're putting in these unidirectional carbon fiber walls, and it's moderating it. And there's other ways to moderate it. And also outside of that, you can see on the edges, they're using that, he's calling it like the 3D carbon fiber grid lattice system. And that's kind of wrapped around. I think they may have done something differently. You can see the lattice along the entire edges. I just took the edge guard off of this, and it's right underneath that. And if you look directly underneath if you hold it and the light just right, you can see them at the bottom of this layup that I opened up here. Kind of shine the light on it just right. You can see the cross hatching there. You see that?
I do.
So it's basically wrapped around the entire paddle. I think one of the changes they may have done for the new paddles, version 2, is instead of wrapping it around the whole paddle, so the edge foam included, they wrapped it around the center part that includes all this black EVA foam and kind of wrapped it like a burrito.
Okay.
Big burrito. So very similar construction. I'd say it still hits. It's still in the same family as the Beta Ripples, but definitely some differences in performance. So you want to give us... Do you want me to go first? You want to go first, Eddie?
Go for it, John.
All right. It's stiffer. The new ones are stiffer. And in addition to being heavier, you can definitely feel the swing weight difference. They're a stiffer paddle. You remember the beta versions? They just had this plush, super springy, super powerful feel. So that has been moderated with the reinforcements, I imagine, and all the different reinforcements they've done to it. So it's got a bit more stiff feel. I wouldn't put it the same stiffness as like a classic Gen 2 thermoform paddle, but I'd put it as a similar feel in terms of stiffness to like the JOOLA Force. They're softish, but definitely stiffer than the original Beta Ripples. There's definitely a reduction in firepower. It's still top tier power, but you can feel that it's now legal, at the top of the legal limits, but not anything bananas like some of the original Beta versions. And I feel like you're losing some of the dwell time also. So I was not getting the elite spin and elite ability to shape the ball with crazy topspin or even ridiculous slice as you were with the original Betas. And that tracks too because everything's a little stiffer now. The ball's not penetrating and digging in with all the dwell like it was on the original. So those are the main kind of things I was feeling with it.
Yep. Still a power paddle. Mm-hmm. I would not even put it at top tier power. Okay. At this point.
Okay.
Maybe after some break-in, it'll get there. But for me, not top-tier power, but certainly some juice there. Agree with you about the dwell time. One of the most remarkable things about the Ripple originally was just that pocketed feeling that you have on those ball strikes. And not there today. It's there.
Right.
But it's not as clearly defined as it was previously. Sound is different.
Yeah.
Feel is different. It's not as deep-throated as it once was, but still an outstanding paddle.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And some of these things we're talking about, like their drawbacks, like not as much dwell time, not just power. That's not drawbacks. It's just these are legal paddles. This is what is necessary to create a legal paddle. The original Ripples would have broken pickleball, in my opinion, right? Because they do break in and they start more powerful than what legal paddles are. I do want to commend Duong also for the new hybrid shape. So there's a R4, which is, in between elongated and wide body.
I love it.
Yeah, it's a good shape, and the taper on the neck is such that it makes the handle feel ultra long. So. You mentioned the sound of it. They do sound a little different. Sounds a little tighter in the core. So I'll tap on the R4. This one sounded different. So it's still bassy and deep-throated, but a little bit tingier sounding. That's becoming a word.
Yeah.
It's stuck in our vernacular now. And here's the version 2 R2. A little bit deeper. I do feel like they sound tighter and they play tighter. I had another thing I was going to mention. Oh yeah, so in terms of performance, not as much court penetration in terms of the overall power levels of full swings from the baseline. It's one of the first things I noticed with the R2 in particular. I did a big serve and it almost feels like with the illegal paddles and broken mods and everything that's out of spec, you hit the ball and it actually speeds up as it's going through its trajectory. It's probably not an accurate impression, but that's what it feels like. And overall, we're dealing with a pickleball. It's almost like playing badminton. With the birdie, it slows down so much. So a ball that maintains its speed and doesn't have as much distance decay, where it doesn't slow down over the course of its path across the court, is going to feel very different. So I kind of like this term, the way of phrasing it, like court penetration. Like you can hit a ball with a paddle that's got a lot of power and it penetrates into the court faster versus one, even if it has a lot of pop, it initially fires off the paddle very quickly, but it dies. The speed of the ball dies off quicker. So I felt the speed of the ball dying off quicker.
Are you saying that's an actual thing or that's a perceived thing?
I think it's an actual thing. Yeah, I think that's just.
So two balls with the same initial velocity could have different outcomes.
I think
as far as terminal.
I don't know. I have to think more about it. But part of the reason why the ball can sneak up on people so much even with these at 14 feet away is because of the pop, so it comes off hot. But also there's an extra. Do you remember when we were playing with the broken Perseus 4 a couple weeks ago at the private courts? Even Dirk even mentioned it on the court. He's like, holy crap, I saw you, Eddie, you were using it. You hit it against me, and you hit it from the baseline, and I barely got my paddle up in time. And Dirk was like, that ball was actually speeding up as it was traveling across the court. Probably not, but it's maintaining its speed better than other paddles. So I think it's a thing. I don't know. So yeah, to your question, we should test that maybe with like video, slow motion video, and just see like, and radar guns, because I can get peak speed on my radar gun.
Right.
And if we had the slow motion video to compare the two, it'd be cool to like do an experiment where we hit with an illegal paddle, one that has that conception of or that perception of being, speeding up as we go, and see if they start off with the same or roughly the same speed if one actually reaches its target.
That'd be cool to look at.
Yeah.
Because I do think that there's a sound aspect to it, that there are some expectations about what you hear versus what you see coming at you. And I think spin has a lot to do with it.
Yeah.
A ball with top spin is going to play a little bit differently than a knuckleball.
Sure. All right.
I like the power aspects of these paddles, though. I really go for a paddle where I can take a full swing at a ball with confidence. And the power of these paddles is dialed right into where that is for me.
Yeah.
With the previous Ripple, I was always like mentally processing, okay, I got to take off 20% of this or the ball's going to go out.
Right.
Despite my, top spin and everything else.
Yeah.
With these, 100% swing and I'm good.
And playing side by side with these versus my main, which is the 11624 Vapor Power, these definitely have noticeably more power and pop. On the power pop spectrum, I think these probably maintain the original beta levels of pop. Very poppy paddles, far less power than the originals. But overall, you're just like, compared to the Vapor Power, these are noticeably more powerful. I was having a hard time in the transition zone. Eric and I were drilling yesterday, and I was drilling with my Vapor. Part of it's because I'm so used to that one too. But I picked up the R2, the new version 2 R2 Ripple, and had Eric just from the kitchen just drill it at my feet in the transition zone. And I could not get a ball not to pop up. Yeah. Every ball that returned to Eric was chest high or above, and he was just smashing them. And I was able to control it much better. So I see that being an issue just for most paddles with this kind of fingerprint of high pop and less power. That's going to be an issue coming, like working your way through the transition zone with these. Nevertheless, I think these are, like I said, still within the Ripple family. Good sweet spots, probably better sweet spots than most Gen 2 and Gen 3 paddles. I don't know. Well, let's talk about the sweet spot. I feel like they're reduced from the beta versions.
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But still good. Not exceptional anymore, I'd say. Not crazy, wide, incredible sweet spots, but good sweet spots.
And to really optimize that with additional weight, you're already, with a stock paddle, you're at a swing weight that's really kind of up there.
Yeah.
With even more weight, it becomes almost intolerable.
That's a great point. Yeah, you can't really add much weight to these unless you have a very high tolerance for high swing weights. So not much room for manipulation and modification of these.
What about dinking?
Dinking.
Some of the same issues you were seeing on blocks?
Yeah. I mean, dinks are harder to control. I think the main sticking point for these in my game were pop-ups from the transition zone. Anything at my feet, and I'm trying to block it or reset it.
Yep.
Resets are just really hard with these. Now, again, it's because I'm used to playing with a less powerful paddle, but these seem harder to control. Overall, though, I think these are still going to be very popular. If the original betas would have been legal and come out and there would have been enough in stock, I think they would have flooded the market. They'd probably be one of, if not the most popular paddle on the market. These, I think, are going to be popular, but they're not going to be.
So would you describe this as being less powerful than the JOOLA Pro 4, but poppier?
Good question. I think that's accurate.
Okay.
Yeah. And overall, the firepower balance is about the same. So actually, I have the Q core results. So the R2 shape got the highest Q core at 0.542. The R1 and R4 shapes are right next to each other at 0.527 and 0.520. And to put it in perspective, that's right in the grouping with the Paddletech ALWC 12.7, the new Holbrooks, and other Paddletech Bantam series, as well as the Proton Flamingo. So right at the top of, and the JOOLA 4s. I should put those in. So all those are roughly in similar spots in my PB core testing. Yeah, but that's a great point, Eddie, that these have a more pop-focused profile compared to the Perseus and Scorpius 4s. So there we go.
All right.
Another option for elite power in the paddle landscape.
Does that do it for our paddles of the week?
I think it does.
Are we doing the white and
let's
black
talk
one?
about the Selkirk. I wasn't sure. So we've been hitting with this for a while now, but I wasn't sure if we could talk about it. But everybody else has been talking about it, so I will too. Now, just a disclaimer, this is not going to be the final graphics. That's the main thing. But we also played with these at the event, and we can't. This isn't the embargoed paddle, so there's other paddles out there. We can't talk about that beyond this one. But this is going to be their newest SLK line, so they're budget paddles. But in my opinion, this, compared to every other Selkirk paddle that's currently on the market, is the best.
Wow.
Yeah.
I don't disagree, but I'm surprised to hear you say that.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think if your goal is kind of a more powerful Gen 3 feeling paddle, which I think a lot of people love that, then this is a great paddle. I put it right at the same firepower and it feels very similar to the 11624 power series. So all those shapes, you've got a wide body in this, and there are other shapes too. By the way, I love this new wide body shape from Selkirk.
I love the shape. I don't have any problems with the graphics or the branding that they have on there. I'm not sure where they're going with it to change it, but I said it many times before, black and white as a combination, really classy.
I know what the core is. Sorry, Eddie,
That's okay.
You're out of focus. There you go, focus. So I know what the core construction is, but I'm not so sure I can exactly say. But it is foam enhanced with polypropylene. So it's a.
Is it called the Era? ERA?
Yeah, Era. That's right. Selkirk.
So I used this paddle when we had our little get together, 8 guys, a couple of Wednesdays ago, and just love the all around aspects of this paddle. It's got power when you need it. But plenty of control. My drops were on fire that day. Yeah. I agree with you. Their best paddle. You throw in price into the mix, where I think this is going to come out, since this is part of the SLK line. Yeah, it might be one of the top paddles of the year.
Yeah, it's going to be. I did get confirmation in the interview. You can go back and look at that. $200 for these, which for Selkirk is a deal.
Totally worth it.
I think it's at that price point. I'd even say it's relevant for some of the top performing paddles out there.
And a massive sweet spot.
Yeah, that shape. So with the 11624s, you have the Pegasus, which is a wide body, but it's a slightly different shape than this. So this is a good alternative, I'd say. This shape for the Pegasus. They've also got, I think they'll definitely be coming out with the Invicta shape, so for elongated. They don't have a proper hybrid, so you can't really get one compare apples to apples with the Vapor shape. But regardless, solid performers. I do think these are going to start bringing Selkirk back into relevancy in terms of
100% agree
paddles.
with that.
Yeah.
All right,
let's skip through. No deep dive today. We're already deep into the podcast, but you have a couple of questions, right?
Yeah, a couple of questions from the last couple of pods. This first one from RTJPB. Hey, John, have you ever tested the PB core of different brand balls? I think it would be interesting to see how much difference there is. Perhaps test like 5 or so of what you and Eddie consider the best balls. And I think you've started some of that work.
I did. I love this idea too. But so last year I started doing a drop test with balls. So I dropped them from 2 meters through a funnel so they would land on a clamped paddle in the exact same spot every time, and measure rebound height. So I had a high-speed camera, or just a slow-mo camera, you don't need high speed, and a ruler on the wall behind that ball, and I'd see how far up they bounced, and an average 10 of those. And I have those data on my website. I have a ball database at JohnKewPickleball.com, and that's been out there for a while. But I don't think that's necessarily the best way to do it. And what I'm going to start doing is I'm doing a ball correction factor for my Q core scores, and which basically involves me shooting each ball that I'm using. Before I shoot it at a paddle, I shoot it at a cinder block. And so the cinder block is holding constant that variable and getting a coefficient of restitution off of that cinder block with 50 miles an hour inbound. And there's a slight fluctuation even in the same ball. So I'm using the Franklin Hollis balls for my Q core. And there's a slight fluctuation, both in weight. The weight's actually really consistent, especially with holeless balls, because they're not drilling. They're almost every single one of them is dead, even 1 ounce, right? Sometimes there's 0.1 plus or minus. Regardless, there's a little bit of variability of the ball coming off of the cannon because of variance in the balls. So what I want to do is start doing that coefficient of restitution at 50 miles an hour inbound for each brand of balls and getting the average for a few balls. It'll take a while, but that's going to be much more indicative. It'll be much more indicative of firepower of the ball and overall power. And you're going to see clearly the JOOLA balls are really hot, as well as Duras, and even the Vulcan balls are much hotter than the Franklin X40s, and the new Franklins are hotter. So we'll get a good sense of where ball power falls subjectively now.
Very cool.
Yeah.
All right, we'll look forward to that. Our next question from DL7132. How noticeable are the differences between middle of the pack power and pop and top end? For example, the Neonic Flare Prime X isn't really that much lower on power or pop than a Pro 4 Perseus, but the percentiles are quite different. This makes it feel like paddles aren't actually very differentiated in power and pop, but the reviews seem to suggest otherwise. So maybe these feel like tiny mile per hour differences on paper, but they translate to a noticeable difference on court. Okay, there's a lot there, but I think you got the gist of it.
Yeah. Excellent question. That comes up, fairly often, because once people start deep diving into my database, paddle database, they're like, wait a second. So the 99th percentile power paddle hits at 59 miles per hour, and the slowest paddle hits at 54 miles per hour. How can that be such a noticeable difference on a court with just a few miles an hour difference? But it is. It absolutely makes a huge difference in playability on a court. Our perception and the reality of this small pickleball court we're playing on. For various reasons. Like you're standing at the kitchen, you're 14 to 16 feet away from your opponents, and anything over 30 miles an hour coming at you is going to be really hard to respond to unless you're anticipating exactly where it's going. So there's a balance between anticipation and reaction. But regardless, I think I ran the numbers at one point and figured out the limit of human reaction time on the court, and anything over 39 miles an hour is too fast to purely respond to with reaction time. It's beyond most of our limits. Now, there's variability in different humans' reaction time. Elite athletes have faster reaction time than others, us mere mortals. Regardless, that's not the only variable here, because we're also dealing with anticipation. That's probably a bigger factor than reaction time. Nevertheless, to get back to the point, just even a few tenths of a mile per hour difference in ball speed coming off a paddle is a very noticeable difference on the court. We've all felt it. You've played against a broken mod. All of us have, right? If you've played in any tournaments, or a broken end gearbox, Pro Power elongated, et cetera, all of these out of spec paddles, the ball gets on you so much faster. And it's not like the ball's coming at you at 100 miles an hour instead of 30 miles an hour. No, it's coming at you at 48 miles an hour instead of 44 miles an hour. Just those 4 miles an hour difference and small dimensions we have on the pickleball court, it really can throw off your game for sure.
Yeah, you've just lost your ability to react. You've just passed that threshold, right?
Yeah. So good question, and it's doesn't intuitively make sense when you look at the numbers and you're like, wait a second, we're dealing with tenths of a mile per hour. And now clearly, looking at my database and the way I was doing it before with serving, my own body mechanics, and there's several sessions of serving and different temperatures are not holding every variable constant. There's going to be a lot of user error in that. And I've tried to go back and I've done corrections before. I've noticed my form has gotten better. I'm getting consistently ever so slightly more miles per hour on my serves and my punch volleys, and I've corrected for that. I've gone back. I recently did a fairly large correction across all of my paddles and added 2 miles an hour, which is significant to all my paddles, because what I was doing before was correcting for each batch. So I'd take a couple of key paddles that served as kind of these baselines. So I take the ALWC or ESQC paddle tech out, and I take my vapor power out. I collect data on those first, and then collect data on the other paddles I'm doing, and then look at the differences that the vapor power and the ESQC had compared to my original recordings, and then adjust the ones. I got sick of doing that for every batch of paddles I did. So recently, my most recent paddle database update, I just corrected everything and moved everything up like I think it was 2.3 miles an hour for power and like 1 point something miles an hour for pop. So if you've noticed some slight tweaks and changes, that's why. So
you bumped everybody's grade on the curve.
That's right. But my original point was, yes, when you're dealing with like the difference between the 56th and the 54th percentile paddle, it's irrelevant. That level of detail is you're not going to get more juice necessarily out of the 56th percentile than the 54th percentile because there's so much error. Mm-hmm. Now, there's a lot more objectivity and standardization with the Q core, but there's also going to be inherent. And paddles vary face to face. I've noticed that too. So the same paddle can vary in terms of firepower from one face to another. It shouldn't, but sometimes it does. And paddle to paddle in the same model also varies. So take all of this, as kind of, as best as we can do, but not necessarily. It's not rocket science here. It's not exact science.
All right, good stuff, John. One more question.
Yes, sir.
A couple of people, including Maddie, want to know how we met.
Yes,
I think we've said this before, but I feel
like we've told the story before.
Maybe just a small circle of people.
Yeah.
How do you remember
I was about to say,
fateful day?
I'd love to hear our individual. If we went in separate rooms and told the story to different people, how different it would be. So my recollection.
I feel like this is some sick version of the Newlywed Game.
that ages you, Eddie.
Yeah, it
does. So my recollection, we were at Autry. Mm-hmm. Which is a dog park. And that was back when I started playing. There were only a few outdoor facilities, a few pickleball courts in general. There was one at Apex. There were 2 or 3 courts there, or 4 courts, I can't remember. And
Erie had a couple.
And
Superior.
There were 6 in Superior.
A couple of converted tennis courts in Boulder and other places.
Yeah. And I originally started playing with my wife and a couple of friends here. This was back during COVID. And I saw you, and I can't remember who you're playing with. And Blake was one of them.
Yeah.
And I was like, these guys are good. Like, I think I can hang with these guys. So I went up and introduced myself. I'm like, hey, do you guys mind if I jump in? And there were 4 on the court, I can't remember if there were 3 or 4, but regardless, you graciously invited me as the scrub.
I think we were down one for some reason.
Yeah, I think so too.
You were working on your chainsaw serve.
Okay.
And we called you over, and I think that was the last time we saw you for a while because your chainsaw serve was kicking everyone's butt. And we're like, I'm not doing that again.
That's all I had at that point. I had at that time, it was like a 5-0 serve and everything else was 3-0.
Like, just return it. Just return the ball and we're good.
Right. No, but yeah, you guys were way better than me. And I don't think we played consistently from then on out, but I think we traded numbers. And I was like, that Eddie guy, he's a character. And
we played some mixed as well. I think Paula and Tracy kind of got into the
right.
mix there for a while.
Yeah. So once we started playing for real, I think it was Pickleball Food Pub brought us all together.
That's right.
Yeah, because we regularly went
of like 12
there.
of us.
Yeah, and we were all playing together at that
That's
point.
right. And then you hurt yourself.
Yeah, snapped my plantar fascia out a couple of weeks.
Actually, you got back way faster than I thought. I turn around and you're back on the court. I'm like,
yeah, that was back when I could heal a little faster, just a few years ago.
But yeah, a pickleball match in heaven.
That's right. And here we are. And the reason why we're together on the podcast now is,
why is that?
First of all, you were very supportive of my adventures into content creation in the pickleball space. You're always one of my more supportive. Everybody's been super supportive, but you were always just like, John, I like that recent review. Secondly, I had the idea to to get people's impressions on the court playing with paddles. And I was going to do a review of the 6-0 double black diamond. I never reviewed that, by the way. I think I did a dual review of the Ronbus R1.
Oh, that's right. We did an on-court camera thing, right?
Yeah. So I asked you, I'm like, hey, can I mic you up? I got a lapel mic. I was like, hit with this paddle, and can you give me your impressions? So that never made it to publication, but you were so good on camera. I was like, oh, Eddie's got to roll in this somewhere. I've got to bring Eddie back on. So it was destiny, because I invited you on the podcast early last year, and thankfully you've been here ever since.
Well, until something better comes along, I guess I'll continue to show up every week.
Well, so I won't see you next week. It's been good knowing you, Eddie.
It's all right. I can single hand this.
Right. Good stuff. All right. I like that question. That was fun.
Yeah. On to episode 60.
Okay. Another milestone for next week. And Eddie, great to hang out.
Great to see you, John.
All right.